What's up, y'all? My name is JR, and for those of you who don't already know, I'm a huge movie and TV nerd. If you're new here, I appreciate you taking the time to check out my channel. I hope you'll consider sticking around and joining the film community I'm trying to build here on YouTube. So in today's video, I'm going to be trying something a little bit different. I'm going to be doing a recap and review of the first episode of the new STARZ dark comedy series, Sweetpea. And just so you guys know, this video will contain some spoilers, so if for some reason you haven't gotten around to watching this episode yet and you don't want to know anything that happens in it, you might want to exit this video now. And with that being said, no more wasting time. Let's get into it. Sweetpea is a dark comedy drama television series originally made for Sky Atlantic. It is an adaptation by Christy Swain of the book of the same name by C.J. Scoose about a quiet wallflower who is triggered to a violent breaking point after her father dies and her school bully returns to town, starring Ella Purnell. Now, the series premiered on October 10th of this year on Sky Atlantic in United Kingdom, and it was simultaneously released on the STARZ network here in the United States and Canada. Now, at the time of the making of this video, the series has a 100% on Rotten Tomatoes with no popcorn meter rating as of yet because the show premieres today. It also has a Metascore of 80 on Metacritic based on only 6 critic reviews to this point with no user score as of yet because, again, the show premieres today. And it does not yet have a rating on IMDb, again, because the show premieres today. Now, Sweetpea is a show that I've had my eye on for the last month or two, and now that it's here, and I've had a chance to watch the first episode, I have to admit that I'm moderately excited about the show's potential. Now, the episode starts with the main character, Rhiannon, reciting a literal list of people that she would, and I quote, love to kill. Now, some of them for pretty benign reasons, but eventually she works her way up to the more traumatic reasons to want to unalive someone, which in a weird way kind of lets you know off the bat that the show will make an attempt at injecting some humor into a story that clearly is meant to have a dark tone. Now, we meet Rhiannon's father, the man who took care of her and her sister after their mother left them in the hospital. And the first thing we see him do is play a prank on her, making her think that he had died as she shows up, having run some errands for him and brought him some items. He tells Rhiannon that she needs to learn to stand up for herself instead of let people take the piss, where she's concerned after she complains about people taking a piss, where she is concerned. And he says that she needs to make people see her. He then roars at her, which is meant to be a representation of Rhiannon learning to be a lion or to be tough or to have killer instinct. Now, after he eats one of the food items that she brought him, he begins coughing, and Rhiannon gets up to go find the nurse. And ironically, he actually dies in the meantime, meaning not only that she is here losing what appears to be the one person she has in her life that has her back, but she also feels like she personally failed him, not being outgoing enough to get the nurse to come and check on her dad in time to maybe save his life. So, in response to her latest traumatic experience, she sits in what looks like her dad's company truck in a parking lot in the rain, and now declares, to herself out loud, that she wants to kill everyone. Now, next we see her at her father's funeral, which looked like she planned the whole thing herself, and we are introduced to Saren, her older sister, who lives in France, but came back for the funeral, but shows up late. And during the funeral, Rhiannon happens to see a guy that she had previously slept with, and she waves at him. It also appears that this guy maybe had worked for her dad, and he is trying to kind of ignore her. As she explains, he had been ignoring her ever since they slept together. And in this moment, like I said, he doesn't wave back or seem to look in her general direction. So you get the sense that he just doesn't want to be bothered with her post sexual encounter. So there's that. Now, after the funeral, as people are walking out, they all seem to acknowledge Saren and her loss while ignoring Rhiannon, pretending like she's not even there. And then Rhiannon happens to see Julia exiting the church. And Julia is Rhiannon's school bully, with an entourage, I might add. And this makes Rhiannon walk away from the church entrance altogether, clearly bothered by seeing, Julia again. And she walks towards the back of the church just in time to see someone throwing out her father's picture and the flowers that she used for the service into the dumpster. So from there, everyone goes for drinks at a pub, and Rhiannon is mistaken by a family member, I might add, for a waitress. She then sees, again, the guy that she slept with and manages to ask how he's been. She tells him that they should go get coffee sometime, so clearly, she still wants him. But he awkwardly tells her to call him. She then checks with him to see if she has the right number by memory, which tells you how often she's probably called him. Being that we all use cell phones now, and there's probably not a lot of people's numbers we know by heart, right? And he tells her that she does, in fact, have the right number. So that solidifies that the calls have been going through and he's simply been ignoring her. Now, Rhiannon and Saren talk over the food, as Julia shows up complaining about said food. Now, she finally notices Rhiannon, thanks to Saren, and asks how she is, but it's not like a real, like, how you doing? It's like, how you doing? I just feel like I need to ask this, but I don't really care. Now, Rhiannon panics in that moment, explaining the obvious, that her father just died. And Julia responds simply, "So sorry for your loss," which is actually the name of the episode, or the title of the episode. Now, Saren then tries to leave without saying goodbye to Rhiannon, which shows you that they probably are not particularly close, right? Now, Rhiannon confronts her, and Saren tells her to go and get a drink with Julia at a place called Square, right? She also tells Rhiannon that they need to sell the house that Rhiannon is currently living in, because she was living there with her dad, and their dad's business. She then explains that Julia is going to be the real estate agent to help them sell the house. And Rhiannon is beside herself at the idea of that. But Saren explains to Rhiannon that she just needs to get over the whole Julia thing. So we get a chance to see that, Saren probably knows that at the very least, Rhiannon feels bullied by Julia from their days in school, and that Saren just kind of doesn't give a shit, right? Get over it. Now, from there, we see Rhiannon on the bus, playing with the idea of unaliving Julia for ruining her life back in school and now moving back home to, in her words, do it all over again. Now, she gets off the bus and walks home down a pretty busy street, which will come into play here later in the story. And as she walks down the street, we see that there are people changing a billboard near the bus stop where she gets off, which again is a small thing in the moment, but will lead to a much bigger thing later in the episode. Rhiannon arrives home, a nice, quaint kind of cottage, you know what I mean? But, still near a pretty busy street. And immediately as she enters the home, she notices her dad's medications sitting on an end table next to his favorite chair. She takes out his knife out of a plastic bag she brought home, and she washes it. We then see her wake up in her dad's chair the next morning. And while getting ready for work, she finds a wig in a drawer. And it turns out it's either the wig she used to wear in school, or it's exactly like a wig she used to wear in school, because when Julia was bullying her, the stress of, the ongoing situation apparently would make her hair fall out. So that's why she had the wig. So next we see her arrive at work at a newspaper, and she notices a new job posting for junior reporter. Now she goes into her boss's office, her boss, Norman, and she speaks to him about it. She gives him her CV and even has ideas for stories that she could cover. So she came into his office prepared, really to, try to take advantage of this opportunity. But Norman shoots her down, referring to her as Sweetpea in the process. So now we know how the show got its name. He tells her that she lacks killer instinct, and then he roars at her, right? Now this is the second person that has roared at her, because her father roared at her in the hospital as well. Keep that in mind. She tells him that she doesn't have killer instinct yet, but that she'd like to. He then dismisses her and tells her to throw her resume and story ideas into the recycling on the way out. So just completely disrespectful. I mean, that just was unnecessary. But I get what's happening. So Rhiannon goes back to her desk and uses her father's knife to cut up letters she's supposed to be opening, because she works in reception for the newspaper. And a man named A.J. Pierce arrives. And due to Norman knowing his mother, he goes into the office momentarily and talks to him, and he gets hired as a new junior reporter for the paper. And Rhiannon is furious. She actually is so furious that she spills the coffee she was told to go get for the two of them. And that happens repeatedly during the episode and is meant to show how people at her job don't pay her any attention and constantly encroach upon her personal space while holding hot cups of coffee that she's been sent to fetch. So it's clear she's the person that gets sent to get the coffee all the time, and she's always spilling the coffee because people are paying her so little attention that they bump into her, walk right past her, stuff like that. So, angry at the situation, Rhiannon actually follows AJ from the office with the knife, I might add. And, calling him an entitled Nepo baby, in her head, but out loud, because there's in this episode, there's a lot of voiceover stuff that's kind of happening to kind of, speak to what's going on in Rhiannon's head, and I get it. So Rhiannon, after following him for a while, she corners him in a nearby tunnel, knife still in hand. But at the last second, she loses her nerve, dropping the knife because she cuts herself on the hand. And AJ turns and asks if he took her job. She says no, and AJ walks away. Now, I want to point out that AJ seems like a pretty decent guy because he also apologized to her when he showed up at the newspaper. And you could tell that it kind of caught her by surprise that, he thought enough of her to apologize. So you can tell there's something there. And the writers are no doubt going to make him Rhiannon's love interest moving forward in this story. That's absolutely going to happen. Now, from there, Rhiannon arrives home and her little dog, Tink, is there waiting on her. He greets her at the door. So she walks the dog, getting a message on her phone from her sister reiterating that she wants to sell the house. But she looks up and she sees the new billboard. Remember, they were putting up a billboard near the bus stop where she got off of earlier. And it's a billboard of Julia as a real estate agent. And so Rhiannon, kind of shocked at the sight, immediately grabs at her hair and notices that a strand has fallen out. So she drops her dog's leash and she goes and checks in the reflection of the little bus stop, thingy. And at that moment, her dog is hit by a car. Now, we next see her drinking as she digs a grave for her dog in the front yard in front of her house. She then calls Saren, in France, I assume, and leaves a voicemail telling her that Tink is dead and she begs her not to sell the house. She explains that Julia can't have that too, and that she wants instead for Saren to tell Julia to just leave her alone, stop trying to destroy her life. But she pauses and she thinks for a minute, and then she tells Saren on the voicemail that she'll just tell her herself. So she goes to Square, like her sister had suggested, and she confronts Julia in the crowded club, accusing her of ruining her life. Now, Julia, of course, is dismissive, calling her delusional and obsessed with her. This causes Rhiannon to leave the club in the pouring rain, and she happens through a park and walks into another tunnel, this time with a river running through it. A lot of tunnels in this town. She stops and she sits down to think for a second. She takes her dad's knife out of her purse. And just then, out of nowhere, a drunk man arrives to literally take a piss near her, not on her. But when she freaks out about it, he claims he didn't see her. Another person who does not pay attention to her, she feels unseen. That's kind of a running theme in the episode. But at that point, she loses it. And she's, in response, he threatens violence in return. And at that point, like I said, she loses it and she stabs him several times, yelling all the while, "Do you see me now?" She then realizes what she's done and she kind of panics for a second. And she essentially tosses the man's body into the river. And it's a deep enough river for his body to disappear into. So, clearly the body's going to be found throughout the course of the story. But still, deep enough river for her to push him in and for his body to completely be submerged by water. She then picks up the knife and the purse and she continues home almost like nothing happened. And from there, we see her cleaning up in the bathroom sink back at home. And she stops and she looks herself in the mirror, her clothes covered in blood. And finally, she roars loudly. Cut to black. So, look, this episode was really clean, meaning that there wasn't a lot of filler here. Everything was kind of straight to the point. Every scene that was present meant something to the main character as it pertained to the theme of the episode, that being loss. Rhiannon is a character who feels down on her luck, that life has denied her of the things she feels like she needs in order to flourish. And as a result, all she has done is to just try to survive, right? So in this episode, what the writers did was quite simple. They simply took the character and subtracted the few things she had in her life to cope with the life that she's been made to live in her mind, right? That being her father at the beginning of the episode, the house that he and her shared after that, the job that she wanted, then her dog, and then last but not least, her dignity when the drunk man peed near her. A masterful job by the writers. Really, really, really A+ work. Now, I would give this episode a 90%, honestly, or a 9.0 if you're thinking IMDb score. Now, I've always been apprehensive about shows produced in the UK, especially comedies, because sometimes the cultural differences can impact how an American audience connects with the characters or what's going on in the stories and why those things might matter. But I think so far this show seems more than capable of clearing those hurdles, and it did so rather easily, at least to this point. I like that this show is a miniseries with only 6 episodes, eliminating the chance that it could grow stale over time, because I definitely see this as being the kind of concept that could get old really quickly. I like the way the story progressed here in the first episode, with the writers being smart and keeping things simple instead of bending over backwards trying to subvert expectations. That subvert expectations is like a cuss word to me at this point. And as writers, I think sometimes writers, we make these things so difficult and they're really not. And last but not least, I really, really like Ella Purnell. And that makes me more sympathetic to the character she plays here in this show, which makes me want to see her win by the end of the story, whatever winning might look like in a situation like this one. The point is, I see Sweetpea as being the kind of show that is capable of captivating audiences in the same way that the original Dexter series did, before it all went wrong. And if I'm right, then we can thank STARZ for giving us something compelling to watch, at least for the next few weeks. But what do you guys think? Did you enjoy the first episode of Sweetpea? If you did, what was your favorite scene in the story? Let me know in the comments. And for those of you that might be new to the channel, be sure to like and share this video. If you really like the content, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. That way you'll be notified whenever I drop a new video. You can also now support the channel by leaving a super thanks. If you should be so inclined, I'd really appreciate it. Also, be sure to go and check out themadScreenwriter.com for more television and film reviews and info on my upcoming film projects. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. I got screenplays to write. I'll catch y'all on the next video.